The end of the world began on a Tuesday, not with a bang or a whimper, but with thousands of dark shapes blocking out the sun. Captain James Stone stood on the roof of the North American Defense Command, binoculars pressed against his eyes. His knuckles turned white as he gripped the railing. The ships hung in the sky like massive black stones. They didn't move. They didn't make a sound. They simply existed where they should not exist. "How many?" asked General Walker, his voice unusually quiet. "Too many to count, sir," replied Stone, lowering the binoculars. At 42, Stone had seen his share of combat and crises, but nothing like this. His weather-beaten face showed the first signs of real fear his colleagues had ever seen. The radio on the general's belt crackled to life. "Sir, we're getting the same reports from all over the world. London, Beijing, Moscow, Johannesburg, Sydney, they're everywhere." Stone watched as a smaller craft detached from one of the massive ships. It descended toward the United Nations building in New York. The world held its breath. Dr. Emma Reed pushed through the crowd of scientists gathered around the monitors. As the head of the Defense Department's Xenobiology Division, she should have been prepared for this day. They had trained for it, planned for it, but deep down, most believed first contact would never happen in their lifetime. "It's broadcasting something," said her assistant Tom Miller, his fingers flying across the keyboard. Tom was young, barely 30, but was the best tech specialist the military had. His dark skin glistened with sweat as he worked to decode the signal. "Can you translate it?" Emma asked, brushing a strand of graying hair from her face. "I don't need to," Tom replied, looking up with wide eyes. "It's in English." The message played across every screen, every radio, every phone on Earth at exactly the same time. "People of Earth, we are the Vex. Your world is now under our protection. Resistance will be met with correction. Acceptance will be rewarded with life. You have one Earth Day to present your leaders for processing." The message repeated 3 times before silence fell again. "Processing," Emma whispered. The word sent chills down her spine. The world's governments debated for exactly 20 hours before reaching a decision. Stone sat in the back of the emergency session, watching as leaders from every nation argued, threatened, and finally reached the only possible conclusion. "We fight," said the American president, her voice firm despite the fear in her eyes. "Humanity does not surrender." Stone nodded, in grim satisfaction. He had never voted for her, but in this moment he felt a swell of pride. The response was sent exactly 3 hours before the Vex deadline. It was simple. "Earth belongs to humanity. We choose freedom." The Vex replied with fire. The first attacks targeted military installations. Stone watched from the underground bunker as live feeds showed bases around the world going dark. There was no explosion, no dramatic battle. The Vex ship simply passed overhead, and everything electronic died. Then came the ground forces. They weren't what anyone expected. Not the lizard-like creatures of science fiction, or the gray humanoids of conspiracy theories. The Vex foot soldiers were mechanical, but moved like living things. 8 feet tall, with 4 arms and smooth, featureless faces that somehow still managed to look cruel. "They're not robots," Emma insisted, studying the footage. "There's something organic inside them, some kind of pilot or essence," but there was no time to study them. Within hours, the Vex had taken control of every major city on Earth. Millions died in the first day alone. 2 weeks after the invasion, Stone led what remained of his unit through the ruins of Chicago. The once mighty city was unnaturally quiet. No birds, no insects. Even the wind seemed afraid to blow. "Movement ahead," whispered Anna Frost, the former diplomat who had become one of Stone's most trusted soldiers. Her blonde hair was now cut, short and dirty, her once manicured hands wrapped around a rifle. Stone raised his fist, signaling the team to stop. Through his scope, he saw a Vex patrol marching 3 humans toward a large structure that had been built in the center of what was once Grant Park. The building pulsed with an eerie blue light. "Processing center," Tom murmured. They had seen them before, these strange structures that appeared in every captured city. Humans went in. Nothing came out. We need to know what's happening in there, Stone decided. Doctor? Emma nodded grimly. She had been arguing for this mission for days. If we're going to fight them, we need to understand them. The inside of the processing center was worse than any of them had imagined. Humans were lined up in rows, connected to machines that glowed with the same blue light as the building. But it wasn't the machines that made Stone's blood run cold. It was the expressions on the people's faces. Pure terror, frozen in place as something was slowly drained from them. They're harvesting something, Emma whispered, her scientific curiosity temporarily overcoming her horror. She pulled out a small device of her own design and began taking readings. We need to help them, Anna said, raising her weapon. Stone put a hand on her arm. There are hundreds. We'd never make it. We need to understand first, then come back with a plan. A scream cut through the air as a new batch of prisoners was brought in. Among them was a child, no more than 10 years old. Something in Stone snapped. New plan. He growled. We take as many as we can. Now. The next few minutes were chaos. Gunfire, screams, the strange high-pitched whine of Vex weapons. Stone's team managed to free 23 people before they had to retreat. As they ran through the underground tunnels that had become humanity's new roads, Emma couldn't stop staring at her readings. What is it? Stone asked once they were safe in their hidden base, an old subway station 40 feet below the city. I don't know how to explain this, Emma said, her voice shaking slightly. But according to these readings, they're not just killing people. They're extracting something that my instruments can only register as neural energy. They're taking their souls? Anna asked, her face pale. I don't believe in souls, Emma replied, but something about human brainwave patterns is valuable to them, and there's something else. She pulled up another reading on her device. When the Vex tech interfaces with human neural patterns, there's a strange feedback loop that doesn't seem to happen with their other conquered species. How do you know about other species? Tom asked. Emma pointed to markings on the wall of the processing center, visible in the photos she'd taken. This isn't their first rodeo. These are tallies. Dozens of worlds, dozens of species. So what? Makes us different? Stone asked, cleaning blood from a cut on his arm. I don't know yet, Emma admitted. But I think it might be our only advantage. As the small group of survivors tended to their wounds and the rescued prisoners, none of them noticed that one of Emma's devices was still active, its readings growing stronger by the minute. None of them realized that whatever made humans unique, whatever created that strange feedback loop, was growing stronger in response to the Vex presence. Something was waking up inside humanity, something the Vex, with all their terrible power, would learn to fear. 3 months passed since the day the sky turned black with Vex ships. 3 months of hiding, fighting, and dying. But also 3 months of learning. Dr. Emma Reed hadn't slept properly in weeks. Her makeshift lab in the abandoned subway station was lit by a mix of salvaged LED lights and old emergency lamps that cast long shadows across the walls. Papers covered in complex diagrams and hastily scrawled notes were taped everywhere. In the center of it all sat a piece of Vex technology, a ASI neural interface device they had managed to steal during their third raid on a processing center. You need to rest, said Tom Miller, placing a cup of something that vaguely resembled coffee next to her. Emma didn't look up from her microscope. Can't. I'm close to something. I can feel it. Tom sighed and leaned against the table. Close. To what exactly? We've been studying this thing for weeks and all we've learned is that it gives people headaches and nosebleeds. That's not all, Emma muttered. She finally looked up, her eyes bloodshot, but bright with excitement. The headaches are happening because the device is trying to connect with our brains, but there's a mismatch. Like trying to plug something into the wrong socket. And that's good news? Tom raised an eyebrow. It means they didn't design their tech to work with humans, which means they didn't expect whatever it is about our brains that makes us different. Emma stood up suddenly, wincing as her stiff muscles protested. Get Stone and Anna. They need to see this. Captain Stone, arrived 20 minutes later with Anna Frost. Both were covered in dirt and looked exhausted. They had been scouting a new Vex outpost to the north. "This better be good, Doc," Stone said, his voice rough from breathing in too much dust and smoke. "We've got movement topside. More of those harvester units moving into the suburbs." Emma nodded and led them to a small side room where a volunteer from their group, a former electrician named Paul, was sitting with electrodes attached to his temples. "Meet our first successful interface," Emma said proudly. Paul gave a weak smile and raised his hand in greeting. The movement caused a small device on the table next to him to light up and hover a few inches off the surface. Stone's eyes widened. "Is he controlling that?" "Yes and no," Emma explained. "The Vex tech doesn't work like our technology. It doesn't respond to direct commands. It's more intuitive. Paul here is thinking about how it would feel if the device moved and the device responds." "That's impressive," Anna said cautiously. "But how does this help us fight them?" Emma's smile widened. "Because this is just the beginning. I've managed to modify the interface to work with human neural patterns, and I've discovered something incredible." She moved to a computer screen and pulled up 2 brain scans side by side. "This is a normal human brain," she said, pointing to the image on the left. "And this is Paul's brain after 30 minutes connected to the modified interface." The differences were subtle, but unmistakable. Certain areas glowed brighter, new connections forming between regions that normally didn't communicate. "What are we looking at?" Stone asked, stepping closer. "Evolution," Emma replied simply. "Rapid directed evolution of neural pathways. The interface is changing him, but not in the way the Vex intended. It's like our brains are rewiring themselves to not just use their technology, but to improve upon it." Tom frowned. "Wait, are you saying the Vex tech is making us smarter?" "Not exactly," Emma said. "It's making us different, accessing parts of our brains we normally don't use. And here's the kicker." She pulled up another scan. "This is what happened when we captured that Vex soldier last week, and I briefly connected it to the interface." The alien brain scan was dramatically different from a human's, but one thing was clear. There were areas of damage, like tiny electrical burns. "Our patterns hurt them," Emma said quietly. "Something about the way human minds work is inherently incompatible with, maybe even hostile to, their neural structure." Stone looked at Paul with new interest. "Can he access their systems? Their networks?" "Theoretically, yes," Emma nodded, "but we need more practice, more volunteers, and—" She hesitated. "And what?" Anna pressed. "And we need to understand what we're actually doing," Emma admitted. "Because whatever this is, it's not just technology. The Vex aren't just harvesting people for labor or resources. They're harvesting something else." 2 days later, Stone led a team into a smaller processing center on the outskirts of what used to be a quiet suburban neighborhood. With them was Paul, wearing Emma's modified interface device. 3 other volunteers, a former nurse named Lisa, a college student called Mark, and an ex-cop named David, also wore the devices. "Remember, we're here for information," Stone reminded them as they approached the building. "Get in, connect to their system, download whatever you can and get out. No heroics." The 4 interface users nodded, their expressions a mix of determination and fear. Emma had warned them that prolonged connection could cause side effects, nosebleeds, migraines, possibly worse. 30 minutes max, Tom added, checking his watch. "After that, I'm pulling the plug whether you're done or not." The raid started well. Stone's team had become efficient at avoiding Vex patrols, and the processing center was less heavily guarded than the larger ones in the city center. They made it to the central control node without being detected. Paul went first, pressing his palm against the smooth surface of what they had identified as an access terminal. The modified interface on his head hummed softly as it established a connection. His eyes fluttered closed, then opened again, but they were different. The pupils expanded until they were almost all black. "I can see it," he whispered, his voice filled with awe. "Their network. It's beautiful. One by one, the other three volunteers connected. Their expressions changed from concentration to wonder to horror as they accessed the Vex system. They call it soulfire, Lisa said suddenly, her voice distant. The energy they harvest from sentient beings. It feeds something in the void. Gods, Mark whispered. They worship void gods, ancient entities that promise power in exchange for soulfire. Dozens of worlds, David added, his voice breaking. They've harvested dozens of worlds before ours. Stone exchanged worried glances with Anna and Tom. This was more than they had expected to learn, and none of it was good news. Ask about weaknesses, Stone urged. How do we fight them? The four volunteers were silent for a moment, seemingly searching through the vast network. Then simultaneously, all four began to bleed from their noses. Something's wrong, Tom said, moving forward to disconnect them. Their vital signs are spiking. Before he could reach them, Paul's eyes snapped fully open, now completely black. They fear us, he said, but his voice had changed, becoming deeper, almost echoing. Humans are different. Our minds don't just resist them. They can channel something else, something they've been running from for millennia. We need to go, Stone said urgently as alarms began to sound throughout the facility. Now! They disconnected the volunteers and retreated, fighting their way out through suddenly alert Vex guards. By the time they made it back to their hideout, Paul and the others were unconscious but still alive. Emma worked tirelessly to stabilize them, monitoring their brain activity with growing concern. What did they mean? Stone asked her later as they watched the four volunteers sleeping fitfully. About channeling something else? Emma shook her head, her expression troubled. I don't know, but their brain scans show even more changes now. It's like they opened a door to something, and whatever it is, I don't think it can be closed again. In his sleep, Paul smiled, his eyes moving rapidly behind closed lids as if seeing something wonderful and terrible. Around his bed, the lights flickered briefly, and for just a moment the air seemed to shimmer with an energy that hadn't been there before. The Vex had brought hell to Earth, but humanity, it seemed, had something worse waiting to be unleashed. The map spread across the old subway maintenance table showed the remains of what used to be Chicago. Red X marks indicated Vex strongholds. Blue circles marked resistance safe houses. Green stars represented successful strike points over the past 2 weeks. There were 12 green stars. Captain James Stone placed a 13th green star on the map and stepped back, allowing himself a small smile. The ammunition depot near the old museum is down. That makes 13 hits with 0 casualties on our side. Anna Frost nodded approvingly. The Vex are getting sloppy. They didn't expect resistance to last this long, let alone grow stronger. They didn't expect the interfaces, Tom Miller corrected, glancing toward the side chamber where 20 volunteers now trained daily with Dr. Reed's improved neural devices. What had started as 4 test subjects had grown into what Stone called their Special Weapons Division. Emma Reed entered the command room, looking tired but satisfied. Unlike the early prototype, her latest neural interfaces were smaller, more elegant, silver circlets that fit comfortably around the wearers' heads. No more nosebleeds, no more migraines. At least not for the humans. How are they doing? Stone asked. Better than expected, Emma replied. Paul can now disable a Vex security system from half a mile away. Lisa has learned to redirect their communication signals, and Mark can actually control their smaller units for short periods. The implications hung in the air. What had begun as desperate guerrilla attacks had evolved into something much more effective. The human resistance was no longer just surviving, they were starting to win. General Krath stood perfectly still as the human resistance destroyed another outpost. Through the eyes of his soldiers, he watched the small band of fighters move with surprising coordination. Some wielded conventional weapons, but others merely stood back, their eyes dark, their heads adorned with strange devices. These were the troubling ones, the ones who could reach into Vex systems with their minds, the ones who caused his soldiers to malfunction, to turn on each other, to simply shut down. This should not be possible, Krath said to the empty command chamber. His voice was like grinding metal, each word precisely formed. They are lesser beings, prey species. The holographic display showed another Vex unit falling under human control, turning its weapons on its companions. Krath felt something unfamiliar stirring within. The humans would call it fear. The Vex had no word for it. Increase harvesting operations, he commanded. Double the soulfire extraction quotas. The Void Lords must be appeased if we are to receive their guidance. The chamber's automated systems acknowledged the command, but Krath detected hesitation in the machine's response. Even his own technology was being affected by these humans. And bring me one of them, he added, one with the mind device. I must understand what we face. David, the former police officer, led a small team through the underground tunnels. Their mission was simple: plant interface disruptors at key points in the Vex network. These small devices developed by Emma and Tom would create areas where the Vex couldn't communicate with each other, blind spots in their otherwise perfect surveillance. 2 minutes, David whispered to the 3 fighters accompanying him. The silver circlet on his head hummed softly as he extended his senses, feeling for Vex presences nearby. There's a patrol coming. 2 units, standard configuration. The team pressed themselves against the walls of the tunnel, weapons ready. David closed his eyes, focusing on the approaching Vex soldiers. With the improved interface, he could now not only detect them but also sense their intentions, their programming. Wait, he said suddenly. Something's wrong, they know. The wall beside them exploded inward. Not the 2 Vex soldiers they had sensed, but a massive harvester unit, 9 feet tall with multiple limbs ending in various tools and weapons. It moved with terrible speed, grabbing the nearest human fighter before anyone could react. Ambush, David shouted, reaching out with his mind to try to disrupt the harvester's systems. But this unit was different, shielded somehow against his mental intrusion. In seconds, 2 of the fighters were down. The third managed to fire a plasma rifle, salvaged and modified Vex technology, that tore through one of the harvester's limbs. David pulled his own weapon, but before he could use it, something struck him from behind. As consciousness faded, his last thought was to activate the interface's emergency beacon. Then darkness took him. They took David. Emma's voice was flat, controlled, but her hands shook as she showed the team the data from his interface's final transmission. And they did it deliberately. This wasn't a random patrol, it was a targeted abduction. Stone slammed his fist on the table. They're adapting to us. We need to get him back, said Lisa, her eyes now permanently darkened around the edges from prolonged interface use. They'll try to extract information. Worse, said Paul quietly. Everyone turned to look at him. Of all the interface users, he had connected the deepest with the Vex systems, sometimes spending days in a trance-like state, navigating their network. They'll try to understand how we're doing what we're doing. They fear it. Fear what exactly? Anna asked the question. They'd all been wondering. What is it that we're channeling when we use these interfaces? Paul exchanged glances with Emma, who nodded slightly. It was time to tell them. We call them the Bright, Paul explained. That's the closest translation we can manage. They exist, in a dimension parallel to ours, a place of pure energy and consciousness. The Vex and their Void Lords have been at war with the Bright for millennia, and somehow humans can, connect to these bright things? Stone looked skeptical. Emma took over. It's our neural structure. Humans have a unique pattern. Our brains are more chaotic than most species, more adaptable. The Vex harvest what they call soulfire from sentient beings, a kind of neural energy that feeds their Void Lords. But human soulfire has a different quality. It resonates with the Bright. Tom let out a low whistle. So we're not just fighting aliens. We're caught in the middle of some kind of cosmic war between dimension gods. Pretty much, Emma admitted. And now they have David. David woke strapped to a table that hummed with energy. His interface had been removed, leaving him feeling strangely hollow, disconnected. His head throbbed with pain, but he forced himself to focus, to observe. The chamber around him was unlike any Vex facility he had seen before. The walls pulsed with dark energy, and in the center of the room stood General Krath himself. David recognized him from the Resistance's intelligence reports, the regional commander of Vex forces, a being of singular cruelty and efficiency. "You are awake," Krath observed. His voice sounded like metal grinding on stone. "Good. Unconscious. Subjects provide inadequate data." David said nothing, conserving his strength, assessing his situation. "Your kind has caused difficulties," Krath continued, moving closer. "This is unexpected, unprecedented. You should have been harvested. By now your world stripped of all useful resources, your soul fire feeding the glory of the Void Lords." "Sorry to disappoint," David managed to say, his voice hoarse. Krath made a sound that might have been laughter. "You misunderstand. This is not disappointment. This is opportunity. Your species has demonstrated qualities that may be of interest to my masters." A smaller Vex entered the chamber, carrying a device that looked disturbingly similar to Emma's interfaces, but corrupted somehow, twisted with additions that made David's skin crawl. "We have studied your technology," Krath said. "Primitive, but effective. Now we will study you." The smaller Vex approached, the dark interface in its hands. David struggled against his restraints, but they held firm. As the device was placed, on his head he closed his eyes and focused on one thing, the training Paul had given all interface users for worst-case scenarios. "If you're ever captured," Paul had told them, "and they try to connect you to their tech, don't fight it. Instead, become a door. Open yourself completely." The dark interface activated, and David screamed. But not from pain. From the rush of power as he threw his mind wide open, becoming not a prisoner but a gateway. Through him, for just a moment, the Bright looked directly at General Krath, and for the first time in his long existence, the Vex commander knew true fear. Alarms blared throughout the facility as systems overloaded, as reality itself seemed to warp around the interrogation chamber, and in the heart of the Vex stronghold something began to wake up. The counterstrike had begun, but not in the way the Resistance had planned. This was something else. Something worse than anything the Vex had brought to Earth. This was humanity's true power unleashed. The rescue team moved through the ruins of what had once been downtown Chicago, their faces grim with determination. Captain Stone led the way, with Anna and Tom flanking him. Behind them came Paul, Lisa, and Mark, the three strongest interface users. All of them wore the silver circlets that connected them to both Vex technology and something else, something from beyond. "The signal's getting stronger," Lisa whispered, her eyes partly closed as she focused on the faint beacon from David's interface. "He's still alive, but there's something else, something big happening around him." The sky above them had taken on a strange quality, not quite the natural blue of Earth's atmosphere, nor the dark pollution of Vex occupation. It shimmered with occasional flashes of light, like heat lightning in impossible colors. "That's new," Anna remarked, looking up with concern. "What are they doing up there?" Paul's expression was distant, his mind partly connected to the Vex network. "It's not them. It's us. It's what David did." Stone stopped and turned to face the interface users. "Explain now." Paul took a deep breath. "When the Vex connected David to their systems, he followed the emergency protocol. He opened himself completely, became a gateway." "A gateway to what?" Tom asked, though his face suggested he already feared the answer. "To the Bright," Paul replied. "Simply. David opened a direct connection, bigger than anything we've managed before, and now the Bright are coming through." As if in response to his words, the ground trembled beneath their feet. In the distance, toward the center of the city, where the largest Vex processing center stood, a column of light shot upward into the strange sky. "We need to move," Stone ordered. "Now." General Krath had abandoned the interrogation chamber, but it was too late. The human subject, David, still lay strapped to the table, the modified interface on his head now glowing, with a light that should not exist in the physical world. Around him, reality itself seemed to be thinning. "Containment protocols have failed," reported a lesser Vex commander. "The breach is expanding." Krath moved through the corridors of his command center, his mechanical body operating at peak efficiency, despite the chaos around him. Vex soldiers scrambled to defensive positions as systems failed all around them. For the first time in the invasion, they were not the predators. They were prey. The Void Lords must be informed, Krath decided. This development exceeds standard operational parameters. He reached the central chamber of the processing center, where the harvested soul fire was collected and channeled. The massive container glowed with blue-black energy, the accumulated neural patterns of thousands of human victims. Krath connected directly to the container, preparing to send an emergency transmission to his masters in the void. But as his consciousness touched the harvested energy, he recoiled in shock. The human soul fire had changed. It was no longer the docile energy source they had been collecting. It had become active, aware, and it reached back toward him with terrible purpose. For the first time, Krath knew what the humans called fear. The rescue team fought their way through increasingly disorganized Vex patrols. Something was wrong with the alien soldiers. They moved erratically, sometimes attacking each other, sometimes simply shutting down mid-stride. "Their network is collapsing," Mark explained as they ran. "Whatever David did, it's spreading through their entire system." They reached the outer perimeter of the main processing center. The massive structure now pulsed with competing energies, the familiar blue-black of Vex technology and a new white-gold radiance that seemed to be eating away at the building from within. "There," Lisa pointed. 10th floor. That's where David. Stone assessed the situation. The main entrance was heavily guarded despite the chaos. "We need a distraction." "We can do better than that," Paul said quietly. The three interface users looked at each other, some unspoken communication passing between them. "We can open more doors." Before Stone could ask what he meant, the three of them sat down in a small circle, their interfaces humming as they joined. Hands. Their eyes closed, then opened again, now glowing with the same white-gold light that emanated from parts of the building. "What are you doing?" Anna asked, her voice tight with concern. "What we were meant to do," Lisa answered, her voice overlaid with something else, something older and vaster than human speech. "What humans have always been able to do. Open doors." The air around them began to shimmer, reality bending slightly as if seen through heat waves. Then the world tore. There was no other word for it. A vertical split appeared in the empty space before them, revealing not the expected darkness, but a realm of pure, radiant energy. Through the tier stepped a figure. It was vaguely humanoid, but composed entirely of light, white at its core, gold at its edges, constantly shifting and reforming. More tiers appeared around the building, more light beings stepping through. "What are they?" Stone whispered, his hand instinctively going to his weapon. "The Bright," Mark replied, his voice also changed, resonating with power. "The enemies of the Void Lords, the balance to the darkness the Vex serve, and now, our allies." The light beings moved toward the Vex guards, who fired their weapons in desperation. The energy blasts passed harmlessly through the luminous forms. When the Bright reached the Vex, they simply merged with them. The alien soldiers convulsed, light pouring from every joint in their mechanical bodies before collapsing. "Now we can get to David," Paul said, standing up shakily. The three interface users looked drained but determined. "The path is clear." David was no longer fully human when they found him. The modified Vex interface had partially merged with his head, tendrils of alien technology extending into his skull. But his eyes, when they opened, were clear and aware. "You came," he said simply as Stone cut through his restraints. "Of course we did," Stone replied. "Can you walk?" David sat up slowly. "I don't know if walking matters anymore. Things have changed. I've changed." Around them, the building shuddered as battles raged throughout its structure. The Bright moved through walls as if they weren't there, hunting down Vex soldiers and commanders. The processing chambers were being systematically destroyed, the Harvested soul fire released back into the atmosphere. "We need to find Krath," David said suddenly. "He's trying to contact the Void Lords. If he succeeds, they'll come through. And that would be bad." Tom helped David to his feet. "Worse than what's happening now?" David's modified interface pulsed with light. "Much worse. The Bright are powerful, but they're just advanced scouts. The Void Lords are gods. Ancient, hungry gods." Stone nodded, grimly. "Then we stop him. Where?" David closed his eyes for a moment, connecting to what remained of the Vex network. "Central chamber, top floor. But we need to hurry. He's already started the summoning." They found Krath in a massive circular room dominated by a swirling portal of darkness. Unlike the clean tears through which the Bright had entered, this was a jagged wound in reality, leaking shadows that seemed to consume the light around them. The Vex General stood before it, his mechanical body transformed. Parts of him glowed with the same light as the Bright, while others had become even darker, absorbing all illumination. He was caught between two forces being torn apart by their conflict. "You are too late," Krath said as they entered, his voice, now a discordant mixture of tones. "The void beckons, my masters come." Through the dark portal, something massive began to take shape, a being of such profound wrongness that looking at it caused physical pain. "We can't fight that," Anna whispered, raising her weapon anyway. "We don't have to fight it," David said, stepping forward. The modified interface on his head now glowed brightly enough to illuminate the entire chamber. "We just need to close the door." He looked back at his friends, a sad smile on his face. "And sometimes, to close a door, you have to sacrifice the key." Before anyone could stop him, David ran toward the portal. Krath moved to intercept him, but Paul, Lisa, and Mark raised their hands in unison, their interfaces flaring. The Vex General froze in place, caught in their combined mental grip. "David!" "No!" Stone shouted, but it was too late. David leaped into the portal, directly at the forming shape of the Void Lord. As he made contact, the modified interface on his head exploded with light. The darkness recoiled, the portal beginning to collapse in on itself. "Channel the Bright." David's voice echoed from within the shrinking darkness. "All of you, now." The three interface users joined hands again, their minds reaching out not just to each other, but to all the light beings that had entered the world. Throughout the building, throughout the city, the Bright turned their attention to the portal. Light met darkness in a collision that shouldn't have been possible in the physical world. The portal shrunk further, the massive shape within it retreating, pulled back by David's sacrifice. With a final flash that temporarily blinded everyone in the room, the portal closed. Where it had been, a small pulsing spot of perfect balance remained, neither light nor dark, but something in between. As vision returned, Stone saw Krath lying on the floor, his mechanical body now inert. The general had not survived being the battlefield between such cosmic forces. "David?" Anna called, looking around desperately. "Where's David?" Paul shook his head, tears in his glowing eyes. "He's gone. But not dead. Not exactly." He pointed to the pulsing spot where the portal had been. "He's there, holding the door closed for now." "For now?" Stone asked. "This isn't over," Lisa said quietly. "The Void Lords know about us now. They'll try again, and the Bright won't leave either. Earth has become something new, a battleground between ancient powers." Mark nodded solemnly. "And humans are the keys to both realms, the bridges between dimensions. The Vex didn't understand what they were waking when they came here." Stone looked at the spot where his friend had sacrificed himself, then at the interface users whose humanity was becoming less certain with each passing hour. "So what happens now?" he asked. "Now," Paul replied, his voice echoing with the voices of the Bright. "Everything changes." 1 month after the battle at the Chicago Processing Center, the world was unrecognizable, not just from the destruction the Vex had brought, but from what had followed. Captain James Stone stood on the roof of what had once been the North American Defense Command, The same spot where he had first seen the Vex ships darkening the sky. Now he watched a different sky, one where reality itself seemed thinner, where colors that had no names occasionally rippled across the blue expanse. "It's beautiful, in a way," said Anna Frost, joining him at the railing. Her blonde hair had grown out slightly, now streaked with premature gray from the stress of recent months. "Beautiful and terrifying," Stone replied, "just like everything else these days." Below them, the former military base had been transformed into something new, a combination of command center, research facility, and embassy. Humans worked alongside, beings of pure light, the bright who had chosen to remain in the physical world after the Vex retreat. 3 weeks ago, the alien invaders had suddenly abandoned Earth. Their ships had lifted off without warning, leaving behind their structures and some of their technology. No one was naive enough to believe they had given up. This was merely a strategic withdrawal. "Dr. Reed wants to see you," Anna said after a moment of silence. "She says they've made a breakthrough with the portal." Stone nodded and followed her, back inside. The corridors were busy with activity as humans and Bright moved with purpose. Some of the humans wore the silver interfaces, their eyes glowing slightly with inner light. These were the bridges, as they now called themselves. Humans, who could channel the Bright and serve as conduits between dimensions. Emma Reed's laboratory had expanded to take up an entire wing of the building. When Stone entered, he found her standing before a familiar pulsing spot of balanced energy. A perfect replica of the one in Chicago where David had sacrificed himself. "You've recreated it," Stone observed. Emma turned to him, her face lighting up with excitement. She looked younger somehow, energized by the incredible discoveries of recent weeks. "Better than that, we've stabilized it. A permanent gateway that doesn't require a human sacrifice to maintain." Beside her stood Paul, Lisa, and Mark, the first and still the strongest of the bridges. Their appearances had continued to change. They looked mostly human, but their skin occasionally rippled with light just beneath the surface, and their eyes had become pools of radiance. "Can we use it to reach David?" Stone asked the question that had been burning inside him since that terrible day. "We already have," Paul replied, his voice carrying that strange harmonic quality that all the bridges developed over time. "Not physically, but we've made contact. He's unchanged but still himself in the ways that matter." "He holds a critical position now," Lisa added. "He exists at the exact boundary between our world, the realm of the bright and the void. He sees everything." "And what he sees is coming to warn us about," Mark finished. A chill ran down Stone's spine. "The Vex are coming back." "Not just the Vex," Emma said grimly. "They've gone to their masters. The Void Lords are preparing a direct assault." "How long do we have?" "A few months, maybe less," Paul replied. "But we won't face them alone." He gestured toward the stabilized portal. As Stone watched, it expanded slightly, and through it stepped a Bright unlike any he had seen before. This one was larger, its light more intense, its form more clearly defined, almost human in shape, but composed entirely of radiant energy. "Captain Stone," the being said, its voice resonating not through the air but directly in Stone's mind. "I am Luminar, emissary of the Council of Light. Your friend David speaks highly of you." Stone fought the urge to step back. You can talk to David?" "He is with us now in a manner of speaking," Luminar replied. "He has become something new, neither human nor bright nor void, but a bridge between all realms. Through him, we have learned much about humanity. And through him," Emma added, "we've learned how to fight back when the Void Lords come." The next few months passed in a blur of preparation. All across the world, humans with the right neural patterns were identified and offered the choice to become bridges. Most accepted. The alternative, annihilation by the Void Lords, was a powerful motivator. Other humans worked to adapt Vex technology, combining it with the knowledge shared by the Bright to create new weapons, new defenses, new ways of perceiving reality. Stone found himself in charge of what they now called the Boundary Force, a military unit composed of both human fighters and bright warriors, training together for the coming conflict. It was strange work, teaching beings of pure energy how to coordinate with flesh and blood soldiers, but it was necessary. "They respect you," Tom Miller told him one evening as they reviewed training footage. "Both sides. The humans because you've led them through hell already. The bright because you don't fear them." Stone gave a short laugh. "Who says I don't fear them?" "You're cautious around them, sure," Tom replied. "But you don't show the fear that most people do. You look them in well, not eyes exactly, but you face them directly. They value that." Before Stone could respond, alarms blared throughout the base. They rushed to the command center, where Emma and the senior Bridges were already gathered around a large display. "It's happening," Emma said without preamble. "Multiple reality breaches detected. The void is coming through." The display showed points of darkness appearing around the globe. Dozens, then hundreds of tears in the fabric of reality, each one leaking shadows into the world. "Earlier than we expected," Paul said, his light flickering with concern. "They must have found a way to accelerate their preparations." Through one of the tiers, massive shapes began to emerge. Vex ships, but changed, corrupted by void energy. Behind them came larger, darker forms that the sensors struggled to track. "The Void Lords," Luminar said. The bright emissary's light, dimming slightly at the sight. "3 of them. More than we anticipated." Stone looked at the display, at the overwhelming forces arrayed against Earth, and felt a moment of pure despair. Then he straightened his shoulders. "We stick to the plan. Activate all bridges, deploy the boundary forces. This ends today, one way or another." The battle that followed would later be called the Convergence by some, the Illumination by others. It was fought not just with conventional weapons or even Vex technology, but with reality itself as the battlefield. Stone led a strike team to what had once been the Vex Command Center in Chicago, where the original portal still pulsed with balanced energy. According to the intelligence provided by David through the Bright, this spot had become a nexus, a point where all dimensions touched most closely. "If we can amplify the portal," Emma had explained, "we can create a reset point, a place where the rules of reality can be rewritten." It sounded like madness, but so did everything else these days. The strike team fought their way through waves of void-corrupted Vex soldiers. The Bright members of the team engaged directly with tendrils of pure darkness that reached through lesser tiers in reality, holding them back long enough for the humans to advance. Stone, Emma, and the 3 original Bridges finally reached the portal chamber. It looked much as it had when David had sacrificed himself, except now the pulsing spot had grown, becoming a perfect sphere of neither light nor darkness. "David?" Stone called out, unsure if his friend could hear him. "We're here." The sphere rippled, and for just a moment Stone thought he saw a face within it. David's face, but transformed, transcended. "He hears you," Paul confirmed. "He's been waiting for this moment." Emma quickly set up the equipment they had brought, a combination of modified Vex technology and devices created with knowledge from the Bright. "This will amplify the portal's natural properties," she explained as she worked. "If David can hold the center point, we can create a new equilibrium between the dimensions." Outside, the battle raged. Through their mental link with the Bright, they could sense the Void Lords pushing deeper into reality, their immense power warping everything around them. "Ready," Emma announced finally. "The amplifiers are set." The 3 Bridges took positions around the sphere, their interfaces glowing brightly as they placed their hands upon the equipment. Stone and Emma stepped back, watching as energy began to flow between the Bridges and the portal. "Now!" Paul shouted, his voice echoing with the voices of countless Bright. "David, now!" The sphere expanded suddenly, engulfing the 3 Bridges. Stone moved to help them, but Emma held him back. "This is what has to happen," she said, tears in her eyes. They knew. They've always known. The sphere continued to grow, passing harmlessly through Stone and Emma, then through the walls of the building, expanding outward at an impossible speed. As it passed, it changed things. Not dramatically, but subtly. The tears in reality sealed themselves. The corruption of the void receded. Through the mental link that all humans now seemed to share at some level, Stone could sense the Void Lords screaming in rage as they were pushed back, forced to retreat from a reality that suddenly refused to accommodate their existence. When the sphere had expanded to encompass the entire planet, there was a moment of perfect stillness. Then, softly at first but building rapidly, a sound like a crystal bell ringing filled the air. The sphere began to shrink again, condensing not back to its original size but into something new. Where the four bridges, David, Paul, Lisa, and Mark, had been, there now stood a single entity. It looked human in form, but its substance was something else entirely, a perfect balance of light and darkness, constantly flowing and shifting but never tipping toward either extreme. What are you?" Stone asked, his voice barely a whisper. The being smiled with four familiar faces somehow overlaid into one. "We are the fulcrum," it said with a voice that was both one and many. "The balance point. Neither bright nor void, but something new, something that can exist only because of what humans are. The perfect bridges between extremes." Emma stepped forward cautiously. "Our friends, are they still?" "We are still ourselves," the fulcrum assured her, "but we are also more. And through us, reality has been adjusted. The Void Lords cannot enter this world directly now. The bright must follow certain rules to maintain their presence here. And humans." It paused, looking at Stone and Emma with eyes that held the wisdom of multiple dimensions. "Humans will become what they were always meant to be. Mediators, bridges, the species that stands at the center of all things." Stone felt a weight lift from his shoulders, the burden of fighting an impossible war suddenly replaced by something else. A purpose, a future. "So it's over? We won?" The fulcrum's smile turned sad. "The immediate threat is over. But this isn't an ending, James. It's a beginning. Everything changes from this moment. Earth is now the Nexus world, the center of a new reality where dimensions meet and balance each other. There will be challenges, adjustments, new threats, and new allies. But we'll face them together," Emma said firmly. "Yes," the fulcrum agreed. "Together. That is humanity's greatest strength, the ability to stand between extremes, to adapt, to change, to embrace both light and darkness without being consumed by either." As the fulcrum spoke, Stone became aware of changes happening across the planet. The strange sky was settling into something new, still Earth's familiar blue, but now occasionally shimmering with hints of other realities just beyond perception. The remaining Vex structures were transforming, their alien geometry softening into something that could serve as conduits between dimensions rather than harvesting centers. And most importantly, he could feel humanity changing. Not physically, but mentally, spiritually. The barriers between minds were becoming more permeable, allowing for a level of understanding and empathy that had never existed before, while still preserving the individual identity that made each person unique. The Vex had brought hell to Earth. Humanity had responded with something worse, at least from the perspective of the invaders. They had brought change, adaptation, evolution, the very qualities that the Void Lords and their servants feared most. "So what happens now?" Stone asked, echoing the question he had asked a month ago when everything seemed darkest. The fulcrum gestured to the world outside, a world transformed, a world reborn. "Now we build something new, something that has never existed before, a reality where all dimensions can touch without destroying each other, a universe where balance prevails." "Everything changes," Emma said softly, understanding dawning in her eyes. "Everything already has," the fulcrum replied. "And it will keep changing. That's what makes it beautiful." Stone looked out at the new world, still familiar enough to be home, yet transformed into something greater than it had been before. The Vex had brought hell, thinking to conquer and consume. Instead, they had triggered an evolution they could never have predicted. In trying to end humanity, they had instead helped it transcend. And now, everything had changed. Forever.